Welcome back, friends. Welcome back. Earlier this week, the Belgian government collapsed after just 5 months in office. In March, the Ukrainian government fell apart. In February, the Dutch government failed. They had all got one thing in common. Besides their failure, all were coalitions following elections using proportional representation. In the UK, the first-past-the-post voting system is under some threat because the traditional third party, the Liberal Democrats, are performing strongly at the moment in the polls for next week's election. In the event of a hung parliament, the Liberal Democrats' price of support could be a change to proportional representation. With me now is Philip Norton, the Professor of Politics at Hull University. Welcome. And Anthony Barnett, the founder of the Open Democracy website. Anthony, welcome. Anthony, you would like a change in this system?
I would indeed.
How?
How would I like it? I think that they should put to a referendum, to us the voters, whether we should change our electoral system or whether we should go to one which is more proportionate, not perfect proportionate. And I would argue very strongly, and I think the British people would vote for a fairer system.
What do you think?
Well, it wouldn't be a fairer system if we switched. It depends what you're looking for in an electoral system. Ours depends how you define it, but it's as proportionate as others. If you actually look at proportionality of power, the way it's looked at the moment is merely the relationship between votes and seats, not the relationship between seats and negotiating power in the House of Commons. Our system is actually quite proportional. The other fundamental aspect is accountability. You're choosing a government, and most importantly of all, you know you can sweep that government out of office at the next election. The problem with alternative systems tends to be you can't do that. Government's a result of post-election bargaining, of the sort you've already referred to, which can fall apart, but they're not necessarily accountable come the next election if they're all fighting the election as separate parties.
So in what sense do you mean that in fact there would be a change being prevented at that next election?
I mean, you can sweep government out at the next election. We've got accountability because under our system it facilitates, doesn't guarantee, but it facilitates single party government elected on a particular platform. So at the next election, electors know precisely who's responsible for public policy. It's one body, it's the party in government. You can sweep that party out at the next election. It's replaced by another one. With alternative systems, quite often what happens is post-election bargaining keeps exactly the same people in office.
But you see, the point is that it used to work if there was a two-party system. In a three-party system, a large majority of the population can not vote for the government, which then gets complete power. So only less than 35% of the population, the electorate, the voters, voted for the last Labour government in 2005, and only about 22% of the electorate as a whole. So when you talk about the failures at the beginning, our system fails to represent how people vote. It produces a government which lies and which is corrupt, and it produces an enormous amount of abstention, and we have a system failure which we need to address.
Well, we don't, because I mean it doesn't actually, it's not a consequence of the electoral system that we have necessarily corrupt government. You've got that in plenty of other systems which have got different systems of election that takes place, and under PR you can actually end up with a government that's got 0% of the support if it's the product of post-election bargaining for which not a single elector has actually voted.
But the point is, if you take, if you want an example of where I think a fairer system works, which is Germany, in Germany the parties go into the election, they get an outcome, they then negotiate a coalition, and the two parties that have negotiated the coalition then take that to their own people, and they decide whether those terms are agreeable. The process is open, it is transparent, it is certainly more accountable than here. Here what we have is this tiny little clique which grabs hold of a party, as Cameron did of the Conservative Party recently, or as New Labour did, a kind of coup, and then supported, if you like, by the focus of the media, you get a form of elected dictatorship. It's not accountable in the slightest.
But that's what
elected dictatorship. What about that?
Well, that's what you get in the other systems, because it's a dictatorship which is decided post-election, for which the voters have not voted. Germany is a good example of that, and Germany is a good example of the difficulty of actually turning a government out At least in our system, government's responsive because it knows it can be turned out at the next election.
But
If you want an
Germany,
example,
often German parties are defeated. I've been in Germany when...
if you look at post-war, that's not the case.
Yes, no, post-war, obviously I'm talking
Well,
post-war.
if you take the whole history of Germany, it's very rare that a government has changed because of the result of an election, as distinct from a third party switching from one party to the other.
Well, I mean, you know, we saw a switch from the Social Democrats to the Christian Democrats.
Which is the exception.
And it's not the exception. This is you know, this is a system working, and it works well. But I think the critical issue here is what kind of democracy do we want? And people where they used to feel our first past the post winner takes all kind of represented the British system, they no longer do. And what's striking about the present situation is, for the first time, majorities are saying they want a hung parliament. They want to force the parties to work with each other, and they don't feel the old system any longer represents them.
Well, now we're seeing that the polls are suggesting people are moving away from that, and it's not unprecedented. It's probably a critical period, as it was early in the 20th century, when a third party comes up and replaces the existing second party as the main challenger to government.
So do you think that basically coalitions are unstable?
They are, yes, because under our system, you've got prospective stability. You know if a party's returned with an absolute majority, it's going to be in for 4 or 5 years. You can get post-election bargaining coalitions that stay in office for quite a while, but you don't know for certain they will. It's a hand-to-mouth existence as an inherent instability.
You see, there's this belief in strong government here, which I think has produced weak government, corrupt government, hysterical government even, and has produced a government which is dishonest. And so one of the reasons why the third party, the Liberal Democrats, are coming up is because they want a fairer political system. That's one of the things that people find very attractive about them. And I'm sure this is coming. The Constitution itself in this country is a kind of wreck. And, you know, we have to actually reassemble it in a democratic fashion rather than a monarchical one.
What we're witnessing at the moment is a crisis of confidence, but it's not in the political process, it's in the political class. The evidence is that people understand the processes and are reasonably quite satisfied with them.
I've rarely had anyone say anything that I disagreed with more fundamentally.
Well, it's not a matter.
I mean, the point is that the people, if you remember the House of Lords, I believe. I mean, you know, you go around and ask people, that's one half of our parliament, whether they think there should be a House of Lords, and they'll overwhelmingly say no, it's nonsense. If you ask people whether they should think there should be a written constitution, it's not high on their desires, but 70% on average over the last 15 years has said they would like to have a written constitution.
And then when
the idea that the population likes the system but just thinks there's a little bit of a problem in the political class is completely false.
But when you drill down beyond these headline figures, if you say things like, are you against sin? They'll say yes. But when you drill down on things like the electoral system and start to give them priority, same with the House of Lords, initially do favour an elected second chamber. And then when you actually say, well, do you prefer that over, say, the House of Lords doing its present job well in terms of scrutinising government, checking law and so on, they actually prioritise what the House of Lords presently does. Electing a second chamber actually comes way down the list.
So really, they like having a House of Lords. They like having unelected
They like
chamber,
what we do.
But the chamber is itself, in its own existence, is corrupt. Is a source of corruption.
It's not at all.
Well,
No, well, so is you can say that about the House of Commons.
Right,
It's got
well,
far more problems, and that's elected.
That's
the same applies elsewhere.
ventilated those two really well, both of them. Thank you very much for those and alternatives. Thank you to them both. Well, now, the excitingly unpredictable nature of this election has seen a massive growth in political betting. Bookmakers in the UK expect they will handle £30 million worth of bets. That's just during the run-up to next week's general election. More than double the amount in any previous British election. Joining me now is Mike Smithson, the founder of a website called politicalbetting.com. Well, how do people go about it if they want to bet on this race or anyone?
It's very simple. Most bookmakers can do it online, but what you've got to do is work out what you want to bet on. And this election, it is so extraordinary that it goes from one to another, that people, as soon as the Conservatives seem to be doing well, all the money's going on the Conservatives. Then as soon as the Liberal Democrats seem to be doing well, the money's going on the hung Parliament option. And also, people are also continuing to bet on Labour. So because you've got this extraordinary closeness, lots and lots of money is being wagered. You also get crazy things which are going on, where we've had the prime ministerial debates between the challengers. People are betting what colour tie will they wearing, testifying? Will certain words be said during that particular debate? And people sort of go through, and what they're doing is they're checking out everything that, shall we say, Gordon Brown says, and he's got a habit of saying hard-working families. And if you'd put money on hard-working families, you'd have got to, you know, if you put £10 on, you got £40 back last night.
And so if you got together with his or somebody else's speechwriter and got them to put your favourite phrase in a speech, I suppose that's illegal, is it?
Well, no, it's not. It isn't illegal, but it's if it was city and if it was involved financial institutions, it would be illegal. But you do get a fair amount of what's insider dealing, and you've got to be very careful about that, because clearly, if people are aware of something, and they will always try to make a fast buck on it.
Right. And what about daring bets and so on, risky bets that have made the day?
Well, I'm very proud. Back in 2005, on May 27th, I bet on Barack Obama at 50 to 1. I put it because I just liked the way he looked in the video, and of course that to be the next president. And 3.5 years later, that came good. And I've you know, one looks around and you're always trying to see good, interesting outcomes, and it's wonderfully satisfying. It's not just the money; it's the feeling I was right.
Right, absolutely. Have you got a bet on this election?
Oh, I've got lots of bets on this election. I've got completely crazy bets.
Like what?
Well, I've got one. There's a fight going on between the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, and two other candidates who are really fighting his seat, and they're the Conservatives, Labour, and the normal parties don't contest it. And I've got somebody called John Stevens, who's fighting the seat with the backing of somebody called Martin Bell, who was an anti-sleaze campaigner, and I've got 100 to 1 on John Stevens. So if Stevens actually comes in and wins in Buckingham, I make quite a lot of money.
Oh, so you're going to be excited when that result comes.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah. And but there's dozens of ones like that where you're trying to spot something that might happen, and you get your money on in advance. And it's, you know, if you've got a few 100 to 1, if you have bets winning on them, you can have a lot of them that fail.
That's right, and you can still only tell your friends about the ones that won, and they think you're a genius.
Oh, indeed, yes.
Yeah. But in the meantime, have you got one you really fancy in this election?
I find this very hard, actually, at the moment. I find that the overall outcome, I can't decide whether it's going to be a Conservative majority or a hung parliament. And I always wear a tie that fits in with what I'm thinking about the election at the moment. And
yes, there's no red.
There's no red on it, but it's blue and yellow. I think that perhaps it is probably still a good bet to bet on Liberal Democrat seats. I think they're going to do better than people are suggesting. And I think that's probably a good bet.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mike, for being with us. It's a joy to have you with us. And my bet is we'll see you next week, of course, when the election will be over. On Frost Over the World next week, we'll examine the result and find out who, what, and what's next for Britain, and more particularly for Britain and the world, and Britain and Europe, and so on. And if you want to keep up with the election, Al Jazeera English will be running an election programme next Thursday night. As the results come in, I'll be interviewing politicians throughout the night. So join us for all that, and in the meantime, vote for Al Jazeera English. It's a safe bet. Bye-bye for now.